Everyone, welcome back to another video, and today we're gonna be solving Cambridge O-Level Chemistry Paper 1 Multiple Choice October-November 2024 Variant 12. Okay, so let's get started. Question number 1 is that helium gas and argon gas are mixed in a closed container at room temperature and pressure. What happens when the two gases are in the container? Option A is argon and helium atoms become evenly mixed throughout the container even though they have different masses. Okay, option B is argon and helium atoms both move towards the bottom of the container. The argon atoms settle more quickly because they're larger. ठीक है, option C is argon and helium atoms both move towards the bottom of the container. The helium atoms settle more quickly because they're smaller and lighter. And the D option is argon atoms move to the bottom of the container because they're heavier. Helium atoms move to the top of the container. Okay. So one thing which you can see in option B, C, and D is that particles are moving to the bottom and top of the containers. Okay. In option B, argon atoms and helium both move towards the bottom of the container. In option C, argon and helium atoms also both move towards the bottom of the container, and helium atoms settle more quickly. And in option D, argon atoms move to the bottom of the container because they're heavier, and helium atoms move to the top of the container because they are lighter. Okay, so in all three options B, C, D, particles are either moving to the bottom of the container or the top of the container. Okay, so to explain this MCQ, I'm gonna give you an example. Okay, for example, this is your room. Okay, this is your room. Okay, your room has many gases. For example, it has nitrogen N2, whose atomic mass is AR is 28. Then your room has oxygen O2, whose AR is 32. Then your room has carbon dioxide, whose MR is 44. Okay, the heaviest gas in your room might be among these three is gonna be carbon dioxide because it has an MR of 44. Have you guys ever heard that carbon dioxide is the heaviest gas in your room? So the bottom of your room has more carbon dioxide because it settles because it's heavy, and the top of your room has more nitrogen gas. Have you guys ever heard it? Never, no. You guys have never heard that the bottom of your room has carbon dioxide and the top of the room has nitrogen because of the difference in their, AR and MR values. Never, no. So that's what happened with gases. Okay, in a container, it does not depend either a gas is heavy or light. Okay, the gas is evenly mixed. Okay, it cannot be that they move towards the bottom, then one settles. That's completely wrong. Okay, so the correct option is going to be option A, which says argon and helium atoms become evenly mixed throughout the container even though they have different masses. Okay, so that's the correct option. Even in your room, you have evenly mixed nitrogen, oxygen, and carbon dioxide. Okay, just because one gas is heavier and other is light does not mean that one's gonna be settling at the bottom and one's gonna be on the top. Okay, let's move on to MCQ number 2, which says substance X has a simple molecular structure and substance Y has a giant covalent structure. Which row is correct? Okay, X has a simple molecular structure and Y has a giant covalent structure. X could be an element or a compound, and Y could also be an element or a compound. Okay, let's talk about simple molecular structures. When you think of simple molecular structures, what comes in your mind? When I think of it, I think of chlorine gas. What's coming in my mind? I'm just like journaling it. Okay, then what else comes in my mind is ammonia gas. Then another gas which comes is carbon dioxide gas and oxygen gas. So that's all what's coming in my mind right now. The next one is Y has a giant covalent structure. When I think of giant covalent structure, what really comes in my mind is graphite, then diamond, okay? And the third thing that comes is silicon dioxide, probably because these three are the examples I've studied in the syllabus, so that's all what comes in my mind. Okay, diamond is carbon, pure carbon. ठीक है, graphite is pure carbon and silicon dioxide is SiO2. ठीक है, if I check for simple molecular structures which I have labeled, this chlorine is an element, ठीक है, this ammonia is a compound, this carbon dioxide is also a compound, and this oxygen is an element, ठीक है. So for simple molecular structures we have both elements and compounds, so either X could be an element or a compound or an element or a compound, ठीक है. Now let's check for Y. When I look at Y, carbon, I know it's an element, ठीक है. I know carbon for diamond as well as an element. Silicon dioxide is a compound, so it can be an element or a compound because for giant as well I have both the elements and the compounds, so it has to be this. Option D is going to be the correct option. I hope you get the sense of the MCQ. Let's move on to the next one, which says the diagram shows an atom of element Z. Which symbol of element Z is correct? ठीक है. So now we have the number of electrons in the shells. Let's count them. So this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So I have a total of 13 electrons, and the number of electrons and protons is same in an atom, ठीक है. In ion, the number of electrons and protons is different, but in an atom, the number of electrons and protons is same. So hence, we are going to have 13 protons as well. So that means that over here, you write the proton number below, and above, you write the nucleon number. So below, it's going to be 13, and above, it's going to be 13 plus 15. Why? Because nucleon number is whatever is inside this nucleus right over here, ठीक है. And inside this nucleus I can see 13 protons and 15 neutrons, so 13 plus 15 is going to be 28. So that's what the structure of Z is going to look like. Let's move on to the next MCQ, which says a sample of element Q contains two isotopes. The diagram shows the relative abundances and relative masses of the two isotopes, ठीक है. This is the relative abundance line, and these are the relative masses, ठीक है. Abundance basically means the amount it is present in the nature, ठीक है, the amount of substance present in the nature, ठीक है. For example, if I say that I have 10 tables and 2 chairs, so the abundance of the tables is going to be 10. It's more. Tables are more abundant because I have more of them, and the abundance for chairs is going to be less because I have less of them. So that's a very lamest example of abundance. So for relative mass of 20, I have the abundance of 1, ठीक है, and for relative mass of 22, I have the abundance of 5, ठीक है. Now, what is the relative atomic mass AR of the sample of Q, ठीक है. Now, I have to find the AR of sample of Q. So what I'm going to do is, first I'm going to write over here my abundance, and here my relative mass, ठीक है. For 20 mass, the abundance is 1, and for mass 22, the abundance is 5, ठीक है. Now I'm going to take the total number of my abundances, ठीक है. The total number of my abundances is 5 plus 1, which is 6, ठीक है. So I'm going to learn this formula, 6 over 1. 1 is my abundance for the 20 isotopes into 20, ठीक है. I'm going to repeat. First we add the total abundances, then we write the abundance of the first isotope as a fraction like this and multiply it with the number the relative mass, and we add it into the second abundance. Second abundance is 5, so it's going to be 5 over 6 into 22. 22 is basically the relative mass. Okay, and for this the answer is going to be 21.666, which can be rounded off to 21.7, and here you go with the answer, which is D. And in case you guys don't like this formula, the simplest and easiest method to do this by simply mentally calculating it without having to use the formula, though this method is less reliable because you're just generally calculating it, formula is more reliable, but let me share it with you guys. What you do is you look at the abundance. The more the abundance, the more your relative atomic mass is going to be near that number. Okay, now we have more abundance of this. Okay, 22 is more. 22, for 22 we have 5, and for 20 we only have 1. So the answer is going to be near 22. Okay, that's an easy formula, and 21.7 is near to 22. Okay, the more abundance you have, the more near your answer is going to be to that relative mass. Okay, I hope I made myself clear. Let's move on to MCQ number 5. It says, which statement about electrical conductivity is correct? Covalent compounds such as glucose conduct when molten or dissolved in water. Covalent compounds never conduct electricity, ionic compounds do. Okay? Dilute acids such as sulfuric acid conduct because all the ions are free to move. Well, that's correct, because in sulfuric acid you have H plus ions and SO for 2 negative ions, and these ions are free to move, therefore sulfuric acid can conduct electricity. Now let's read option C, which says ionic compounds such as sodium chloride conduct due to the movement of electrons. In ionic compounds you never have electrons, you always have ions. Okay, so that's going to be wrong. Metals such as copper conduct due to the movement of positive ions. Never. Metals such as copper conduct due to the movement of electrons in them. Okay, the positive ions are stationary and stagnant, they don't move. The sea of electrons basically moves, which helps copper conduct electricity. Okay, so let's move on to MCQ number 6, which says, which substance is not malleable and conducts electricity by the movement of electrons through a lattice of atoms. Okay, the first thing is it should not be malleable, and the second thing is it should conduct electricity by the movement of electrons through a lattice of atoms. Okay, for sodium chloride there cannot be a lattice of atoms. Okay, there has to be a lattice of sodium ions and chloride ions. Okay, we have to deal with atoms, not ions, so cross. For solid sodium chloride, there again going to be sodium and chloride ions, and it does not has to be malleable. Gold is very malleable. Okay, you make jewelry out of gold because it can be turned into different shapes, so the answer is definitely going to be C. And graphite does not has ions, it has carbon atoms. Okay, let's move on to MCQ number 7, which says, what is the relative molecular mass MR of ethene? Okay, the average mass of the isotopes of C and H compared to 1/12 of the mass of the atom of carbon-12. Okay, let's calculate it ourselves first because these options are super confusing. They're going to confuse you guys and might mislead you as well. So ethene is C2H4. That means 2 times the mass of carbon. That's going to be 24 plus 4 times the mass of hydrogen, because hydrogen is 4, that's going to be 4, and that's going to make a total of 28. Okay, so what we have done is we have taken 2 times the mass of carbon, which was 12, so 12 plus 12, and 4 times the mass of hydrogen, which was 1. Okay, the average mass of the isotopes of carbon and hydrogen compared to 1/12 of the mass of a carbon-12 atom. That's wrong. Why that's wrong? Because we are basically what we're doing. How did we calculate it? We basically 2 times did the mass of carbon and 4 times the mass of hydrogen. We never used the average mass of the isotopes, so that was not correct for me. The atomic numbers of the isotopes of carbon and hydrogen, you don't only have to take it for carbon and hydrogen, you have to take it for 2 carbons and 4 hydrogens. ठीक है? The atomic numbers of the isotopes of carbon and hydrogen compared to. No, why would you take the atomic numbers? You never take the proton numbers to calculate the relative atomic mass. Atomic number is the proton number, so that's going to be wrong. Twice the air of carbon plus 4 times the air of hydrogen. Well, that's correct for ethane. That's what we have done. We have taken twice the air of carbon plus 4 times the air of hydrogen. So it's going to be option C. Let's move on to question number 8, which says, what is the relative molecular mass MR of N2O? Okay, N2, nitrogen is 14, so it's going to be 14 into 2, which makes it 28. 28 plus 1 oxygen, which is 16, and that's going to give you 44. Yeah, that's going to give you 44. So it's going to be option C. You simply have to add it and refer to the periodic table to check the AR values. I just know them, that's why I'm using them. If you guys don't know them, refer to the periodic table and just be on the safe side, okay? MCQ number 9 says, which contains the greatest mass of oxygen, okay? So now in that, what you have to do is, you know that the AR value, the MR value of this, the molecular mass of this aluminum nitrate, whatever this compound is going to be equal to the mass of 1 mole of it, okay? If I say that, for instance, I'm just giving a lame ass example, if this is 50 grams, okay, that is going to mean, if this is 50 grams, if the MR I calculate is 50 grams, that is going to mean that 1 mole of it has 50 grams, okay? So I can know the amount of oxygen in 1 mole of aluminum nitrate. How can I know the amount of oxygen in 1 mole of aluminum nitrate? Because I know that the oxygen in this formula are equal to the oxygen in 1 mole of aluminum nitrate. So that is going to be 3 into 3. That's 9 oxygens in total into 16. Okay, get your calculators and just solve it. 16 into 9, that's going to get you 144. So you know that 144 grams of oxygen are present in 1 mole, okay? How many moles you have? You have 0.2 moles, okay? So for 0.2 moles, you're going to have X amount of oxygen. Just multiply 144 with 0.2, 144 times 0.2, and that's going to give you the answer, which is 28.8 grams, okay? Let's move on to the next question. We have 4 oxygen in this, so we're going to multiply 4 into 16. That's going to give us 64. So it's 64 grams of oxygen in 1 mole. How many moles do we have? We have 0.3 moles. So in 0.3 moles, we have X amounts of oxygen. Just use simple ratio method, multiply 64 with 0.3, and that's going to give you the value of X. That means you have 19.2 grams of oxygen in 0.3 moles. Okay? Next is, we have 3 oxygen is in it, so 3 into 16, and that's going to give you 48. Okay? So 48 grams of oxygen is going to be in 1 mole. And how many moles we have? We have 0.4 moles. So in 0.4 moles, we have X amounts of oxygen. Multiply 48 with 0.4, and you are going to get 19.2. Wow, we have the same amount of oxygen in both of these, 19.2. Okay, next we know that 16 into 3 into 16, because we have 3 oxygen, is going to be 48. So 48 grams in 1 mole. So X is going to be in 0.5 moles. So over here we're going to write 0.5. It's going to be 48 multiplied by 0.5. And that's going to give you 24 grams. So what was the question asking? Which contains the highest, greatest mass of oxygen among all these 4? I guess 28.2 is the highest amount of oxygen we got. So it is going to be option number A. Okay, let's move on to the next MCQ, which says compound Z contains carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen only. Compound Z contains 48.65% carbon, 8.11%, 11% hydrogen. Biomass, what is the empirical formula of Z? Okay, for that you got to calculate the empirical formula. And what you have to do is, you know that the total percentage is going to be 100. Okay? From 100 you subtract the mass of carbon and hydrogen, so you get the mass of oxygen because we have oxygen in it as well. Okay, so from 100 you're going to subtract first 48.65, and then you're going to subtract 8.11, and you're going to get the mass of oxygen, which is going to be 43.24. Okay, right over here oxygen is going to be 43.24. Okay, how do you calculate the empirical formula? For that, you write carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, then you write the masses given to you, the percentages: 48.65 for carbon, 43.24 for oxygen, and 8.11 for hydrogen. The next step is always going to be to calculate the moles. Okay, so to calculate the moles, you're going to divide carbon by 12. Okay, this is the mass, and this is the mR of carbon. So you divide mass by mR to get the moles. This divided by 1 and this divided by 16. If you're wondering what's this, that is simply the mR. Okay, so 48.65 divided by 12, and that's going to give you 4 as your answer. This one's going to give you 8.11. That's going to give you 2.7. Okay, now what you do is you divide all 3 moles you've gotten by the smallest mole ratio. Okay, what steps I told you? Step 1 was to find the moles. Step 2 is to divide all the moles by the smallest mole ratio. The smallest in all 3 of these is 2.7, 2.7, and 2.7. Okay, so let's do it. This is going to be 1. 4 divided by 2.7. You got to be quick with these calculations during the exam because you only have 1 hour for this paper. And this is going to be 3. Now we have a problem. What is the problem? Have you ever seen empirical formula in decimals? Have you guys ever seen empirical formula in decimals? So how can we write this in our empirical formula? And the problem is 1.48 is between 1 and 2. So we cannot round it off easily to 1 or to 2 because it's very in between. It's very close to 1.5, which is the middle. So we cannot round it off. So what we're going to do is we're going to multiply 1.48 and all these with a number which makes this a whole number, near to a whole number. So let's try. That's going to be a hit and trial method. So let's try multiplying 1.48 because we cannot write this directly into this form. हम ये नहीं लिख सकते carbon is 1.48. Have you ever seen this written in empirical formula? Never. So we're going to multiply it by 2 to check out what we get. We get 2.96. So जब we multiply all the ratios we got by 2. So multiplying this by 2 makes us get 2.96. This is very near 3. Multiplying 2 with 3 gives us 6 and 2 with 1 gives us 2. अब हम इसको easily round off कर सकते हैं. This can be easily rounded off to 3. 2.96 is very near to 3. 3 ratio 6 ratio 2, which is going to make it carbon 3, H6, and O2. So I guess that is option B. Okay, which fertilizer contains the highest percentage by mass of nitrogen? So how do you calculate the percentage mass of nitrogen? Okay, so the way to do is first you calculate the mass of nitrogen. 14 into 2 over 80 into 100. For the next, how many nitrogens we have? We have 3 nitrogens. So it is going to be 3 into 14 over the total MR of the compound, which is 149 into 100. Okay, that's going to give you the value for this. For the compound number C, it's going to be, we have 2 nitrogens. Okay, it's going to be 14 into 2 over the total MR, which is 132 into 100. And that's going to give us the value for this one. And for the D part, again, we have 2 nitrogens. We are going to take 2 over 60, 2 into 14 over 60 into 100. Okay, so that's going to give us the value for this. And by simply looking at it, you might be able to guess which has the highest composition. I am guessing that this one, because it has the lowest denominator. But still, let's find out for this one, because B has 3. Let me tell you. But you guys just don't guess it if you are not sure. I'm guessing it because I know the trick that when you have lower denominators, you have jitna lowest your denominator, the more bigger value you're gonna get. Acha, I'm gonna check for B only, otherwise I know that it's gonna be D option. Let me just check it for D. 3 into 14 over 149. Okay, so this one's giving me 28.1879. I'm writing long values because when you're doing comparison, you should write long values. क्योंकि देखें इसका भी तो 28 point something आ सकता है ना. Then you have to compare the both. So you take long values when you are doing comparison. ठीक है? So it's gonna be and well, this is 46.66%, and I know it's going to be D, so D is the correct option. Let's move on to MCQ number 12. It says an electrolytic cell is shown. Which statement is correct? Okay, statement number A is electrons move from the cathode to the anode in the external circuit. That is incorrect because electrons move from the positive terminal of the battery to the negative, and the positive is anode. So they move from the anode to the cathode, okay? But over here, it's the opposite. It's written cathode to anode. That's incorrect. It's anode to cathode. Number B, hydrogen ions gain electrons at the anode. At the anode, hydrogen ions are positive ions, H plus ions. So they are gonna gain electrons at the cathode. So that's also incorrect. C option, in an electrolyte, positive ions move towards the cathode and the negative ions move towards the anode. Well, that's correct because you know that positive ions, cations move towards the cathode, cations, cathode, and anions and anode. So negative ions move towards the anode. And the D option is the hydroxide ions in the electrolyte move towards the cathode. Really? OH negative ions, they are negative ions, so they're going to move towards the anode, not the cathode. So that's incorrect. Let's move on to the next MCQ, which says, in an aqueous mixture of copper 2 nitrate and silver nitrate is electrolyzed. Okay, we have an aqueous mixture, which means we have water. With copper nitrate, we have silver nitrate with pure copper electrodes. Okay, which ionic half equation describes the change occurring at anode? So the problem is that we have copper electrodes. Okay, so what's going to happen is the purification of copper. So silver is gonna do nothing in it. Silver has absolutely no role for the anode and cathode because when we have copper electrodes, and we have copper nitrate solution, so then what happens at the anode is loss of copper. Okay, I'm gonna write loss of copper at the anode, and there is a gain of copper at the cathode. Okay, so there's a gain of copper at the C cathode, there's loss of copper at the anode. So what's gonna happen at anode is that copper is gonna turn into copper ions and 2 electrons. So I guess that's option A. That was easy and straightforward. That is because, let me explain it to you guys. When you use copper electrodes, what basically happens is the copper on the electrodes gets dissolved and ionizes. ठीक है? So that's why there's a loss of copper from the anode, and your cathode, it basically gains copper. ठीक है? So let's move on to the next MCQ, which says, what is a disadvantage of using a hydrogen oxygen fuel cell to power a car? Okay, let's see towards it. Gasoline, petrol is a non-renewable energy resource. ठीक है, that's correct. The statement is correct, but does it something, it has to do something about the disadvantage of using a hydrogen oxygen fuel cell? It's about petrol, ठीक है? This statement is correct. There is no doubt that this statement is exactly correct, that gasoline, petrol is non-renewable. Yeah, it's non-renewable energy. So this is correct, but it has nothing to do with the disadvantage. The question is asking about the disadvantage of hydrogen oxygen fuel cell. Let's read statement B, which says the hydrogen tank may split in an accident leading to an explosion. This is also correct. Okay. This can be a disadvantage, so option B is correct. C is the product of the reaction between oxygen and hydrogen is toxic. How can it be toxic? The product is water. Do you guys think that water can be toxic? Never. Okay, the oxygen is obtained from air. Well, this is an advantage, not a disadvantage, because it's cheap obtaining oxygen from there. So option B is going to be our correct option. MCQ number 15 says, when chemical reaction X takes place, thermal energy is given out. ठीक है, which row is correct? Thermal energy is given out. Energy is being released. Energy is being given out. ठीक है? So, what happens when you give out energy? Energy is being given out, is coming out. What is done? It's an exothermic reaction. Okay, which row is correct for the explanation? ठीक है? For this one I'm reading, more energy is required to break bonds than the energy released when the bonds are formed. That's completely incorrect. Less energy is required to break the bonds than the energy released when the bonds are formed. Yes, D is correct. Now let me explain you why. Okay, I'm going to write a statement over here that in exothermic reactions, more energy is released in bond formation than absorbed in bond breaking. ठीक है? Than absorbed in bond breaking. ठीक है, you always need energy for breaking bonds, so you absorb some kind of energy. But in an exothermic reaction, the energy you absorb to break the bond is less. Compared to when you make the new bond, you release more energy. How come, when you burn coal or when you burn that methane gas in your houses, how come you see a flame? Because there is more energy being produced when the bonds are being formed. ठीक है? So option D is correct. Okay, which statement about a physical change is correct? A physical change is impossible to reverse. That's completely incorrect. Let me give you an example of a physical change. ठीक है? Physical changes are like boiling. Example, ठीक है? You're going to get an idea of it. Boiling हो गया. It is melting. And another is condensation. These are all physical changes. Acha, in a physical change, no new chemical product is formed. Dekhen, boiling mein what happens? Water turns into a gas. Okay, no new product is formed. In physical change, an object just changes its physical form. Okay, water just changes from a liquid to a gas, but it does not change its chemical composition. Okay, so these are examples of physical changes. Okay, so they're easy to reverse. They are not at all impossible. In a physical change, the appearance of a substance may change. Yeah, appearance can change. For example, in water, when you turn it into a gas, from a liquid it turns into a gas. That could be correct. Okay, let's see. New substances are formed in physical change. Not at all. When you turn water into gas, is a new substance formed? No, it's the same water. Okay, there is no energy released or taken in during physical change. That's completely incorrect, because you remember that melting is what is melting? It's an endothermic process. No, melting is exothermic. Because no, melting and freezing, sorry. Freezing is exothermic because freezing gives out. For melting, you need to absorb energy in order to melt. So melting is going to be endothermic, freezing is going to be exothermic, then condensation is going to be exothermic as well. And boiling, to boil, what happens? You need to absorb energy, so boiling is going to be endothermic. Okay, so these are the energy changes. So that is completely incorrect that there's no released or taken in. Energy is definitely released and taken in. So let's move on to the next MCQ, which says gas P decomposes to form gas Q. Okay, this is gas P. It is decomposing to form gas Q. 2 experiments are done to investigate the rate of reaction. The conditions are the same except that 2 different temperatures T1 and T2 are used. The results are plotted on the graphs. Okay. Temperature 1, temperature 2 are used. Which row is correct? The values of x, the value of y, and which temperature is higher. Okay? So the thing over here is we have to look at the steepness of the curve to get which temperature is higher and which is lower. Over here, the product is formed at this time. For example, we label the time. Okay? This is time 5 and this is time 10. Okay? This is time... No, execute. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So over here, the product is being formed at 10 seconds. Okay? So I'm going to write that product is being formed at 10 seconds. ठीक है 10 seconds पे हमारा volume of Q जो है वो steady हो जाता है. But in this, the volume of Q is being steady at this temperature. ठीक है यहाँ पे graph देखें यहाँ पे आके flat हो गया 10. But over here the graph is flat on this time, which is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So over here it took 13 seconds. Over here it took 10 seconds. So what do you think? Which temperature is lower and which is higher? Obviously temperature 1 is going to be higher because the reaction is completing in less time. Okay? The reaction is completing in less time. Over here the reaction takes more time for the same amount, for the same volume. Okay? The length of the volume is same over here as well as over here. Okay, volume is same, exactly the same, but the time is different. This is taking less time. Matlab, this is at a higher temperature. The rate is faster for T1 and T2 rate is slower. So that means it must be at a lower temperature. Okay, so we know that T1 is higher than T2. T1 is higher than T2. These two statements. Now we have to get the values of x and the values of y. That seems to be the moles. ठीक है? Let's count the boxes for the volume of P. ठीक है? We have, this is 1 box, 2 box, 3, 4, 5 and 6 boxes for the volume of P. ठीक है? 6 boxes for the volume of P, and for the volume of Q from the top. ठीक है? You calculate from the top, from where it begins. ठीक है? This 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So the volume of Q is 9. So 9Q. ठीक है? So we have 6P and 9Q. ठीक है? I've just calculated the number of boxes. ठीक है? The total number of boxes. ठीक है? From where it started and where it ended. From where it started and where it ended. Simple boxes calculate किए. I have got 6P forming 9Q. 9Q. These are the boxes. And if I simplify it to the table of 3, I get it 2P forming 3Q. So that's going to be, for X it's going to be 2P and for Y it's going to be 3. So for X it's going to be 2 and Y it's going to be 3. So that's going to be the correct answer. ठीक है, A. Let's move on to the next question, which says samples of nitrogen and hydrogen are reacted and allowed to reach equilibrium. The equation is shown. The temperature is increased and the new equilibrium is established. Which statement about new equilibrium is correct? ठीक है, अब now we have nitrogen and we have hydrogen and they are reacted and allowed to reach equilibrium and the equation shown. Then we increase the temperature and the new equilibrium is established. ठीक है, which statement is correct? The amount of product increases. Okay, when you will increase the temperature, what will happen is if the forward reaction, देखें, -92 means that your forward reaction is exothermic. ठीक है, the forward reaction is exothermic, which means that your backward reaction is going to be endothermic. ठीक है, and when you increase the reaction, the equilibrium is going to do the endothermic reaction. ठीक है, to decrease it. What does Le Chatelier's principle say? This principle is not part of the syllabus, but you guys should know that whenever you make a change in the equilibrium also tries to reverse it. So when you increase the temperature, the equilibrium does the endothermic reaction more to decrease the temperature. ठीक है, so it's gonna favor the reactant side. The temperature is increased and new equilibrium is established. Statement about the new equilibrium is correct. The amount of product increases. No, the amount of product decreases. Yes, the product will decrease because more reactants will be formed. Okay? The rate of the forward reaction is greater than the rate of the reverse reaction. No, new equilibrium. Equilibrium means that the rate of the forward reaction is equal to the rate of the backward reaction. The rate of the forward reaction is less. No, equilibrium means that both rates are equal. Okay? Not equal, both rates are going the same way. Okay? They are not changing. It cannot be less or more. So the amount of the product is going to decrease. Let's move on to the next MCQ. MCQ number 9, which says in the diagram R represents one of the reactions in the contact process. Which statement is correct? Gas Z is SO2. Acha, what we're doing is R represents one of the reactions in the contact process. We take a gas, we add oxygen to it, and we form R, and then R forms the products. Gas Z is SO2. Okay, let's check it out. In R, an iron catalyst speeds up the reaction 9. In R, the pressure is approximately 9. In R, the temperature is approximately 9. For contact process, you should know that the catalyst used is vanadium oxide, vanadium 5 oxide. The pressure we use is 2 atm and the temperature we use is 450 degrees Celsius. So all these three things are correct and we're going to use option A, which is gas Z is sulfur dioxide. It is going to react with oxygen to form sulfur trioxide. Okay, let's move on to MCQ number 20, which is going to be the last MCQ of this video, and we are going to solve next 20 in the next part of the video. Okay, so peroxidized disulfate ions react with iron ions. Okay, the only elements that are either oxidized or reduced in this reaction are sulfur and iron. Which is correct? The element that is reduced and behavior of this ions. Okay, now let's check out the iron has been absolutely oxidized. Why? Because the oxidation number of iron increased from +2 to +3, and an increase in oxidation number means that iron is oxidized. If iron is oxidized, then one has to be reduced. So what is going to be reduced? You don't even have to look at the number of electrons. You just have to guess it that if iron is oxidized, that obviously, because the only two elements that are either oxidized or reduced are going to be sulfur or iron. So the element that's going to be reduced, it's going to be sulfur, because iron is oxidized, so the element left behind is sulfur. So sulfur, and whatever is reduced is an oxidizing agent, and whatever is oxidized is an reducing agent. Okay, whatever is reduced, remember iron is oxidized, so it is a reducing agent. Okay, ठीक है, whatever substance is oxidized is a reducing agent, and because sulfur is reduced, so it is an oxidizing agent. ठीक है, I hope this video provided value to you guys. If it did, do subscribe to my channel and like the video. Thanks for watching. Bye bye.